This decision is sending shockwaves through the ATP, and the timing could not be worse. Just weeks after splitting with Juan Carlos Ferrero, Carlos Alcaraz has made a move that even people inside the tour did not fully expect. No delay. No transition period. No outside hire. At world number 1, with the Australian Open approaching, Alcaraz has chosen a new direction, and it carries real risk. The split with Ferrero ended more than 7 years of work. It closed one of the most successful coach-player partnerships of the modern era. From a 15-year-old prospect to the top of the rankings, this project was built step by step, tournament by tournament, season by season. Ferrero was not just a coach. He was the structure behind Alcaraz's rise, the person who guided his development across surfaces, pressure, and global exposure. That's why what came next matters so much. In the days following the separation, the expectation inside the tennis world was clear. Alcaraz would look outside. A big name. A reset. Someone brought in to replace Ferrero's authority at the top of the team. Several experienced coaches made themselves available. That's normal when the world number 1 becomes free on the market. But that's not what Alcaraz decided. Instead, he made a definitive choice. He confirmed that Samuel López will lead his technical team moving forward, starting immediately and into the 2026 season. No shared leadership. No interim solution. One clear head coach, chosen from inside the existing structure. This is where the decision becomes controversial. López is not an unknown figure. He has been part of Alcaraz's team for years. He has traveled with him extensively during 2025. He has already taken the lead at several tournaments when Ferrero was unavailable, including major events where Alcaraz reached finals and titles. Technically, this is continuity. But structurally, it is a major shift. Ferrero represented external authority. A former world number 1. A coach with his own legacy, his own academy, and his own vision. López represents something different. Proximity, trust, daily presence. Someone who brings calm, energy, and emotional balance. Alcaraz himself has said López helps him relax, laugh, and play freely. That detail is important, because this decision is not just about tennis technique. It's about environment. According to multiple reports from Spain, one of the underlying tensions with Ferrero was Alcaraz's desire to spend more time training in Murcia, closer to home, rather than at Ferrero's academy base. Alcaraz now has his own academy. His inner circle has pushed for that to become the main training hub. This is not a minor logistical change. It shifts control of preparation, daily routines, and long-term planning. There were also discussions around contractual terms, including standard coaching percentages of prize money. These are common at the top level, but when careers reach this scale, even standard arrangements get re-examined. Several former players have hinted that these pressures often come more from entourages than from players themselves. That context makes Alcaraz's decision clearer. This is not a break followed by hesitation. It is a consolidation of control. Former coaches and players have commented carefully but pointedly. Some have questioned whether this was entirely Alcaraz's call or a decision influenced by the people around him. Others have noted Ferrero's own words, that he would have liked to continue. That alone suggests this was not a purely sporting disagreement. By choosing López, Alcaraz avoids disruption. But he also removes a layer of external restraint. That is where the risk lies. At world number 1, with rivals like Djokovic, Sinner, and Zverev entering the season with stable, proven structures, any internal change is magnified. The Australian Open is unforgiving. It exposes preparation gaps brutally. Heat, 5-set matches, recovery demands. This is not the tournament where teams want to test new dynamics. And yet, that's exactly what Alcaraz is doing. The preseason has already begun. Alcaraz is training in Murcia. He is staying close to home. He is keeping his environment tight. There is comfort in that. But comfort at the top can be dangerous if it reduces challenge and accountability. Choosing López is a vote of trust. It says Alcaraz values chemistry and familiarity over hierarchy and reputation. That can work. But it also places more responsibility directly on him. There is no buffer now. No legendary coach to absorb criticism if things go wrong early in the season. This is why the decision feels so heavy inside the ATP. Not because López lacks ability, but because Alcaraz is making this move at the peak of his power, not during a rebuilding phase. The results of this choice won't show up in statements or interviews. They will show up under pressure. In long matches. In difficult moments. In Australia. And from this point on, every success or setback will be linked directly to this decision. If you want real analysis of what's happening behind the ATP headlines, subscribe to World News Tennis. What makes this situation even more sensitive is who is now shaping daily decisions around Carlos Alcaraz. By elevating Samuel López to head coach, Alcaraz hasn't just chosen continuity. He has fundamentally changed the internal balance of power inside his team, and that shift comes with consequences that go far beyond tactics or drills. For years, Juan Carlos Ferrero was the final voice. When choices had to be made about training blocks, travel, exhibitions, or rest, Ferrero's authority carried weight. Not just because he was the coach, but because he was a former world number one with nothing left to prove. That kind of presence creates friction when needed. It slows decisions. It forces second thoughts. And at the top of the ATP, friction is often what prevents mistakes. That layer is now gone. Samuel López knows Alcaraz extremely well. He has been there on the road, in the locker room, in training sessions, and during key tournaments. Players inside the circuit describe him as technically sharp, emotionally intelligent, and excellent at managing energy. Alcaraz himself has said that López helps him relax and unlock his best tennis. That chemistry is real. But chemistry and authority are not the same thing. The question inside the ATP right now is not whether López can coach. It's whether he can push back. Because at this level, the most dangerous moments are not when a player is struggling, but when everything is going well and hard decisions become uncomfortable. This is where the context around the split with Ferrero becomes unavoidable. Several reports out of Spain suggest that tensions had been building long before contract talks collapsed. One key issue was training location. Ferrero's academy had been the center of Alcaraz's development for years. Structured, isolated, controlled. But Alcaraz now has his own academy in Murcia. His family and inner circle are based there, and there has been growing pressure to make that the primary base. From a lifestyle perspective, that makes sense. Less travel, more familiarity, more comfort. From a high-performance perspective, it's more complex. Elite players often train best away from home, precisely because it creates separation. Separation from routine. Separation from comfort. Separation from outside voices. Ferrero understood that. His academy was designed to limit noise and centralize control. By shifting training to Murcia and promoting López, Alcaraz is effectively bringing the center of gravity closer to himself. That can increase confidence, but it also increases responsibility. Every decision now lands closer to the player, not filtered through a distant authority figure. This is why some former players have expressed doubt about whether this was purely Alcaraz's call. Not because he lacks maturity, but because teams at this level are ecosystems. Agents, family members, sponsors, and advisors all have interests. When a project reaches global scale, those interests naturally push for more influence. Ferrero's own words hint at that tension. He did not frame the split as mutual exhaustion or sporting failure. He said he would have liked to continue. That suggests the direction changed around him, not because of him. Financial discussions also played a role, even if they were not the trigger. At the top of the sport, coaches are typically paid a percentage of prize money. As winnings explode, those percentages become substantial. That is normal. But it can also create friction when entourages begin recalculating long-term cost versus perceived value. What matters is not the numbers themselves, but the moment they are questioned. Once that happens, the relationship shifts. By choosing López, Alcaraz avoids renegotiating power externally. He keeps leadership inside the group. But that also means there is now less distance between player and decision-making. The timing makes this even riskier. The Australian Open is not just another tournament. It is physically the most demanding Grand Slam. 5-set matches. Extreme heat. Short recovery windows. Alcaraz has yet to win it. His losses there have often involved physical dips late in matches. That has been a recurring theme, and it requires strict pre-season planning to correct. Ferrero was known for long-term preparation cycles, for limiting unnecessary load before Melbourne, for prioritizing physical resilience over exposure. Now, with a new head coach and a new training base, those principles will be tested immediately. Inside the ATP, rivals are paying close attention. Djokovic enters the season with a familiar structure. Sinner's team remains unchanged. Zverev's physical management has been stable since his comeback. None of them are adjusting leadership weeks before a slam. Alcaraz is the only one taking that risk. This does not mean the decision will fail, but it does mean there is no safety net. If the early rounds in Australia expose fatigue, tactical confusion, or physical vulnerability, the narrative will turn fast. And without Ferrero, there is no shared accountability. Everything points back to Alcaraz. That is the real weight of this choice. He has chosen comfort and control over hierarchy and distance. He has chosen trust over authority. And while that can unlock freedom, it also removes friction, the kind that often protects champions from themselves. The ATP has seen this pattern before. Some players thrive when they take control early. Others learn the hard way that structure matters more than it feels in the moment. The next weeks will reveal which path this decision is taking. What makes this decision even more exposed is that there is no adjustment period left. The season is about to start. The Australian Open is weeks away, and Carlos Alcaraz is entering that stretch with a new hierarchy, a new daily rhythm, and a different balance of influence around him. At this level, timing is everything. Normally, major coaching transitions happen after a disappointing season, an injury layoff, or a clear loss of direction. That's when change feels logical. This situation is the opposite. Alcaraz is world number one. He's coming off a dominant year. He has momentum. And yet, he has chosen to change the structure that brought him there. That's why the ATP is watching closely. Inside the tour, people don't question Alcaraz's talent. That debate is over. What they question now is management. Not in the business sense, but in the sporting sense. How load is controlled. How decisions are challenged. How instincts are checked when emotions run high. Juan Carlos Ferrero played that role for years. He wasn't just a strategist. He was a brake. When excitement built, he slowed things down. When temptation appeared, exhibitions, appearances, travel, he weighed cost versus reward. That restraint doesn't always show on court, but it shapes seasons. With Ferrero gone, that restraint has to come from somewhere else. Samuel López knows Alcaraz's game deeply. He understands his patterns, his strengths, and his emotional triggers. But the challenge is not understanding. The challenge is authority under disagreement. Can López say no when Alcaraz wants to push? Can he insist on rest when confidence says keep playing? Can he enforce limits when pressure from outside voices grows? Those moments don't happen during wins. They happen when the schedule tightens and stakes rise. The preseason already offers clues. Alcaraz has chosen to train primarily in Murcia, close to home. That brings familiarity and comfort. It also brings distractions, whether intentional or not. Home environments are harder to control. People come and go. Routines soften. Ferrero's academy was built to eliminate that. It was isolated by design. This doesn't mean Murcia can't work, but it requires discipline from within, not enforcement from outside. That's a different test, especially for a 22-year-old who has already achieved more than most players ever will. Former players have hinted at this dynamic carefully. Some have suggested that Alcaraz is still growing into full control of his career decisions. Others have pointed out that teams often shift power gradually toward the player as success increases. That transition can be smooth, or it can create blind spots. The Australian Open will be unforgiving if those blind spots exist. Physically, Melbourne is where margins disappear. Long rallies, heavy conditions, brutal recovery demands. Alcaraz's explosive style burns energy quickly. Managing that has always been one of the key challenges of his game. Ferrero was meticulous about it. Now that responsibility sits closer to the player. Rivals understand this. Djokovic has built his career on control and preparation. Sinner's rise has been powered by consistency and physical stability. Zverev's comeback has focused on structure and injury prevention. None of them are experimenting weeks before a slam. Alcaraz is. That's why some inside the ATP see this decision not as reckless, but as bold. It's a bet. A bet that trust and comfort will unlock even more freedom on court. A bet that chemistry matters more than hierarchy. A bet that Alcaraz's maturity is ahead of his age. But bets carry risk. If the early rounds in Australia go smoothly, this decision will be praised as courageous and modern. If there are signs of fatigue, confusion, or loss of sharpness, the questions will come fast. And without Ferrero, there will be no ambiguity about where responsibility lies. That's the difference now. Alcaraz is not hiding behind a legendary coach. He is standing at the center of the project. The structure reflects his preferences. The environment reflects his choices. Success will validate that control. Failure will expose it. This is not about tactics or technique. Those will evolve. This is about leadership, discipline, and self-management at the highest level of the sport. The ATP has seen careers swing on moments like this. Some players grow into full control and dominate. Others realize that structure matters more than freedom, and adjust again. What makes this situation so compelling is that the answer is coming soon. Not in theory. Not in interviews. On court. The Australian Open will be the first real test of this new setup. And whether this decision proves visionary or premature, it will define the next phase of Carlos Alcaraz's career. What makes this moment decisive is that there is no external narrative left to hide behind. From this point forward, Carlos Alcaraz's project is visibly his own. The coaching change, the training base, the internal hierarchy, all of it now reflects his preferences and the direction chosen by his inner circle. That clarity is powerful, but it also removes ambiguity. There is no longer a question of influence. Responsibility is centralized. Inside the ATP, that is being read as a turning point. 4 years, Alcaraz was the prodigy guided by a former world number one. Success could be framed as the product of talent plus experience. Now the equation has changed. The experience layer has been replaced by continuity and trust. That may sound safe, but at the top of men's tennis, safety and stability are not the same thing. Stability is structure. Safety is comfort. The key question moving forward is whether this new setup can preserve the discipline that defined Alcaraz's rise while giving him the freedom he clearly values. That balance is difficult to maintain even for veterans. For a 22-year-old carrying the weight of being world number one, it becomes a daily test. This is why the Australian Open looms so large over this decision. Melbourne doesn't reward talent alone. It rewards preparation, pacing, and problem-solving under physical stress. Alcaraz has shown flashes of brilliance there, but he has not yet solved it completely. The margins that stopped him in previous editions were not technical. They were physical and strategic. Long matches, energy management, shot selection late in sets. Those are areas where coaching authority matters most. With Samuel López now leading the team, the question is not whether Alcaraz can play his best tennis. Everyone knows he can. The question is whether the team can manage him when instinct says push and logic says pause. Whether limits will be enforced when momentum feels unstoppable. That's where Ferrero's absence will be felt most sharply. None of this guarantees failure. In fact, there is a scenario where this decision works perfectly. López understands Alcaraz deeply. The environment in Murcia could provide emotional balance. Comfort could translate into clarity. Freedom could unlock consistency. If that happens, this move will be seen as a sign of maturity, not impatience. But tennis history is unforgiving with transitions made at the top. The tour is full of examples where players adjusted too much, too fast, while winning. Not because the changes were wrong, but because the timing was. Champions are often most vulnerable when they feel secure. When success creates the belief that control can replace structure. That is the line Alcaraz is walking now. What makes this especially notable is how rivals are positioned. Djokovic remains methodical. Sinner's progression has been built on repetition and stability. Zverev's resurgence has been anchored in careful physical planning. None of them are reshaping leadership weeks before a slam. Alcaraz is the outlier. That doesn't mean he's wrong. But it does mean the spotlight will be harsher. Every dip will be examined. Every long match will be dissected. Every loss will be linked back to this moment. Fair or not, that is how leadership decisions are judged at the top of the sport. This is no longer about Juan Carlos Ferrero. His legacy with Alcaraz is secure. 7 years. 6 Grand Slams. World number 1. That chapter is closed with respect on both sides. What begins now is something different. Carlos Alcaraz has chosen ownership. He has chosen to shape his environment, his schedule, and his leadership model at the peak of his power. That choice signals confidence. It also signals exposure. The next few months will not define his career, but they will define the direction of it. Whether this new structure sharpens his edge or softens, it will become clear under pressure, not promises. And that is why this decision matters far beyond headlines. It's not shocking because of who he chose. It's shocking because of when he chose to do it. If you want real analysis of what's happening behind the ATP headlines, subscribe to World News Tennis.